All right, welcome everybody. You are here to find out a bit more about 6 Weeks to Ninja. And I'm going to give you a bit of a taster session of what we cover on the 6 Weeks to Ninja program. So welcome. If you don't know me, my name is Allcott. I'm the founder of a company called Think Productive. We work with organizations all around the world, helping them to reimagine their work, be more productive, be less stressed, and have more clarity and control in what they're doing. We'll tell you a bit more about some of the things that Think Productive is up to at the end of the session as well. I'm also the author of 6 different books, including, most notably for this call, we're going to talk about some stuff that's in How to Be a Productivity Ninja, which is my biggest book, big bestseller in a few different countries. And then I just put a book out just at the end of last year, which some of you I'm sure will know, called Kind, The Quiet Power of Kindness at Work. And believe it or not, there are some quite big crossovers between the subjects of kindness and productivity, which we'll cover a little bit today and a lot more on the 6 Weeks to Ninja program. All right, so let's just start with what is 6 Weeks to Ninja, and then I'm going to share with you some of the content and just a few insights and things that hopefully will just be practical for you guys today that you can take away as well. It's a 6-week program. The idea for the program is I set it up a few years ago because I wanted something that would really fit in around other work commitments that people have, and just allow people to get the benefits of all of the different things that we cover at Think Productive, all the stuff that's in my book, How to Be a Productivity Ninja, but without having to take like a whole day out of work to do like a full day workshop or anything like that. So it's really popular because the style of delivering it is very modular over 6 weeks, and it's 2 hours a week. So we have these 2-hour Zoom calls. We're doing it for the first time, this time as a lunchtime in the UK program. Usually I do it as an evening program. So this is the first time we're doing it in office hours. But it's 2 hours a week over 6 weeks. And that's basically the time commitment. And then on top of that, we have a WhatsApp group, which you'll all be in. And then the purpose of that is that everybody holds each other accountable. It creates this really nice learning community where everybody is going through the same process at the same time. Everyone's challenging their habits. Everyone's struggling with the same kind of stuff. And so, yes, I can be there to answer your questions as we go through the 6 weeks. But often it's other people answering your questions as well, and everyone kind of chipping in. So the sort of style of the program is really to create a learning community around these topics and really get it to a place where you have support from the people around you to help implement a lot of the stuff that we're doing. Over the 6 weeks, we basically talk about a lot of the stuff that's in How to Be a Productivity Ninja. We talk about the 9 characteristics of the ninja. We talk about dealing with information overload. We talk about particularly a model that I go through in that book called the Cord Productivity Model. And this describes how any piece of information enters our world and then ends with something getting done. And so it describes these 4 key habits: capturing and collecting information, organizing that together, reviewing all of that in the context of everything else you're working on, making good decisions, and then finally the doing on the other end. So it's CORD, the Cord Productivity Model. We'll talk about second brains, where to keep all your stuff so that it's not in your head, and enabling you to just have a much more relaxed control in the way that you work. We talk about inbox zero on week 4. One of probably the most popular things that's both in that book and one of the most popular programs that Think Productive has is a really practical program where we literally get your inbox to 0. We do that as part of that week 4 on the program. And then some of the stuff that's my favorite stuff really is really starting to get into the psychology of productivity. How do we manage our minds? How do we get momentum? How do we deal with procrastination, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes? And then this whole theme that comes out in the sort of end of the book, which is the idea of a ninja is a human, not a superhero. So really trying to dispel the myth that we all have to be superheroes to succeed, and really making the point that productivity is a human pursuit. It's messy. We're going to screw stuff up sometimes. And really importantly, we have limits in the way that we approach this stuff. So we talk about work-life balance and just this whole sort of principle of human, not superhero, as we go through as well. All right, so let's talk real quick then about the 9 characteristics of the productivity ninja. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a productivity ninja? Why is that useful? How can that be an approach that will really help you in your work? So the first characteristic, and really all of the other characteristics are roads that lead back to this one. This is the most important thing when we think about productivity. And that is, we do our best work when we have what psychologists describe as flow. So this is a state of mind where we feel relaxed, we feel in control, we feel calm, we feel present, and having those kind of thoughts and that kind of mindset as we do our work allows us to do our best work. When someone is asked the question, when are you most productive? One of the most common answers to that question is when I'm on a deadline. Now, the thing about deadlines is they do produce this sense of flow, but they produce it in quite a stressy way, right? So it's really easy when you're on the middle of a deadline, you know you've got to deliver something by 5 o'clock on Friday, that like, this is the thing I'm working on right now. I don't need to think about my emails or what I'm having for dinner tonight or anything else, because it's created some certainty. The deadline creates this certainty that I'm in the right place, I'm doing the right work. And that's really great. We can get that sense of flow from being on a deadline, but we also get a lot of stress from being on deadlines too. So really a lot of my work is about answering the question, how do we get that sense of flow? How do we get that sense of feeling like we're doing the right work at the right time without always having to rely on deadlines to get there? And that's what I'm really talking about with Zen-Like Calm. We'll talk about a few ways that we do that in a minute. But what's really important is you're very unlikely to have regular states of flow if your head is jumbled up with, oh, got to do this, got to do that, and you have all these things going on. So really getting much clearer about what you're working on, really getting clearer about the commitments that you have with your work, and getting that out of your head really enables you to have a much more relaxed, much more in control mindset in the way that you work. So that's Zen-Like Calm. Really quickly on the others, so ruthlessness. It's not about being ruthless with people or being evil or anything like that. It's about how do we get really ruthless to make really strong decisions and be really decisive in the right moments. Being ruthless on getting rid of unnecessary emails, messages, meetings, the stuff that doesn't serve us, the stuff that doesn't give us the results that we want. So we want to get really ruthless with that. It's really about saying no to a lot of stuff. And we talk about that a lot through the program. Weapon savvy. Obviously, if you're going to be a ninja, you're going to have a really good relationship with all kinds of different tools. There are a whole bunch of kind of thinking tools and models and stuff that will really help. And there's obviously loads of tech tools that help. So we talk about obviously mastering things like email, but really importantly, and one of the things that we do through the program is helping you to set up your to-do list apps, your second brain tools, and lots of other bits and pieces along the way that will just give you the right kind of tech to make good decisions and do great work. Stealth and camouflage, the idea of making yourself sometimes a little bit less available, playing around with the kind of idea of online versus offline, sometimes doing a bit of kind of tactical hiding, getting out of the way, and doing that in service of being able to have really good Zen-Like Calm, having really good deep focus in your work, and not always being available to immediately have to respond to all of these different questions that colleagues have. So just finding some times, whether that's a short little period once a week, whether it's a couple of hours, have it every day, whatever that needs to look like for you, but having some time where you're really consciously and deliberately just a bit less available and you're in that stealth and camouflage mode. Unorthodoxy, the idea of just taking inspiration from really unusual places. Often we will always get to a solution and have the same outcome if we're following the same path. Whereas if we can mix that up a little bit, be a bit more creative, be a bit more curious, we can find even better solutions. We can get to somewhere much, much quicker. We start to be much more innovative and creative in the way that we're working. So unorthodoxy, embracing the idea of taking inspiration from unusual places, doing things a bit differently, experimentation with our own habits, and just really trying to make sure that we're always questioning what's the best way of doing this thing. Agility, pretty important these days, like being able to react and be agile in our thinking about our work, making sure that if something that we've been working on for a long time starts to no longer become the most important thing, that we're reacting to that, we're making changes, and we're steering the right kind of path. Mindfulness. This was actually a really interesting one for me, because when I first wrote the book, when I was writing the first draft, I didn't think mindfulness was going to be one of the characteristics. And as I wrote the book, which was in a beach hut in Sri Lanka, because I really needed full-on stealth and camouflage, I met a Buddhist monk at the bus stop, and he taught me meditation. And I realized how powerful mindfulness can actually be in terms of really helping our brain to focus on the right stuff and just feel that sense of clarity and control. I'll tell you a little bit more in a second about one of the uses of mindfulness, which I think is really, really important. Preparedness. This idea of preparedness is really about giving your future self a gift. So when you're not in a crisis mode, just being aware that there will be another crisis, and being aware that because of that, we want to be fairly organized in the way we work. We want to have the right things in the right places. We want to make stuff easy to find. We want to be thinking ahead, and we want to be preparing the groundwork so that when those difficult times come, when we're in the crunch moments, when we're really super busy, we've got the right kind of resources around us to really make stuff work. And then the final one, human, not superhero, which we just talked about. So just this idea of challenging the notion of perfectionism at work. When I wrote Productivity Ninja, what I found was all the other books that I found around this subject matter of time management and productivity, they were all written with this style that was like, hey, you write this amazing list at 9 o'clock, and then you tick everything off, and you achieve it all, and you high five, and everything's perfect. And, you know, I don't know what your world looks like, but certainly for me, like, life's pretty messy, right? Work's really messy. Things sometimes feel a bit muddled. And I think a much more human approach to productivity, knowing that we'll sometimes screw stuff up, it's just a really, really important mindset to have. So we talk about this idea of human, not superhero. What's interesting, though, is if you start to adopt a lot of the techniques that we talk about on the 6 Weeks to Ninja program, if you start to be doing a lot of the things I'm just going to show you over the next few minutes, you probably will feel like a bit of a superhero, especially to the people around you. They'll be like, oh, Graham's suddenly got this lovely printed out list of all the right stuff, or, you know, suddenly he's really responding to emails much more quickly, or whatever. You know, you can get this sense that other people around you are treating you like somehow you've got these special powers. But actually all you've got is a really good mindset, really good tools. And these are all things that humans can have. There is no special power. There is no secret sauce. And it is very possible to be a human with a good mindset and good skills and good tools, and you feel like a superhero, even though you are still ultimately a human. So we talk on the program around the idea of a second brain. And this is about getting all of the information that you have in your work out of your head in order to really get a much better sense of control and perspective over the way that you work. So a ninja needs a second brain. David Allen, who wrote a book called Getting Things Done, he has this lovely phrase: the mind is for having ideas, but not for holding them. So if you're going through life where a lot of the things that you're working on are stuck in your head, and you're having those little thoughts that go, oh, that reminds me, I must do this. Oh, I need to do that. Oh, I forgot to do that. Then you're carrying too much stuff in your head. And if you get that stuff out of your head and you've got some kind of second brain, which usually for most people looks like some kind of to-do list app, Microsoft To-Do, Todoist, Remember the Milk, these kind of apps, putting it there and then having a really good system around that you really trust will really, really help you to do great work. What I see a lot is that people have maybe like a paper to-do list, or they've written out a to-do list, but then I say to them, okay, and what's important to you today? And then they've got 5 other things that are not written down on that list, but that actually you still need to do. So one of the things that I would really encourage you to do, just as a result of today, is just really think about how much stuff are you carrying in your head right now that needs to be written down. This is something that we instinctively know to be true, right? That this is helpful for us. And my little challenge for you on that is, remember the last time you went on a holiday, or like it was the last couple of days before your Christmas break or whatever, we all have those moments where, you know, as you feel really overwhelmed, as you feel like there's so much to do, you sit down, you write a list of stuff out, and then you just feel a bit better, right? And all that's changed is that you've got that stuff out of your head. You haven't done the things that are written down, but what's changed is you've now got a much more trusted way of being able to handle that. And part of the problem is that when we keep stuff in our head, the brain is not very well set up in short-term memory for remembering lots of stuff, and we know it. You know, so we probably played that game at school. I went to the shops and I bought, and someone says a thing, and then someone says another thing. Most people can't get past about 12 things in that game. And yet, as the human mind, we can put people on the moon, we can solve all these amazing equations, we can create these amazing AI tools. Like, the human brain is pretty amazing in terms of what we can do. And yet we can't remember 12 things in a row. So give the brain a chance to do what it's really great at. And, you know, really the way to enable that is to get all of that other stuff out of your head. Get all the gunk out of your head, start to see clearly what you need to do, and then use your brain, the stuff it's really great at, that intuition, the creativity, innovation, prioritization, all the stuff that actually our brains are really, really well set up to do. And then it's about clarity. So basically, with everything that we work on, what's really important is these two things. And this is going to sound really, really simple, but it's actually one of those things that is a very subtle thing to master. So with everything that you're working on, what you want to have is a very clear idea of what is the desired project outcome. What are you trying to get to at the end of this? How will you know when the project is finished? You know, so you want to develop some words around that, probably some way of quantifying that, but what does the desired project outcome look like, and be as specific as you can. And then what you want is the next physical action you need to take. So it's almost like you've got your end point there, and then it's like, what's the first step? And if you've got a really well-defined end point and a really well-defined first step, it's much easier to have momentum, and it's much more difficult to be procrastinating, because everyone knows that next physical action to take. If you know what it is, then you can just make a start. And so I work with a lot of people who have something on their list which looks something like clear out the spare room, or clear out the garage, or, you know, just something along those lines. You've probably got something like that in your own life. And the problem with that is when you look at that on the list, it just feels like, oh, this just feels like such a weighed down, you know, like lacking momentum kind of idea. Clear out the garage. What a horrible job. How do I start? Whatever. And really, what often happens when I coach people with those kind of things on the list is it really boils down to something much more specific as the next physical action. So the next physical action becomes something like, well, hang on, there's a load of junk in the garage that I know I need to get rid of. I'm really going to need some kind of skip to take care of it, or some kind of rubbish clearance service. Oh, actually, my friend hired a skip 2 weeks ago. Let me get the number for that skip that he really recommended from him. And so then actually your next physical action is, you know, text Dave or call Dave, get the skip number or whatever. And so that just becomes a much easier place to start. And also just defining the end goal of the project. So, you know, rather than just clear out the garage, well, what's that for? Clear out the garage so I can get my car into it. Clear out the garage so that we can make it into a utility space. Like, give it some kind of quantifiability in the way that you're defining these things. So a lot of what we do, that sounds really, really simple, but these two things are really important with everything that we do. And so a lot of what we cover with 6 Weeks in Ninja is really about saying, how can we get down to this art of specificity? How can we really create good habits around asking yourself the right questions to get these two things really defined with everything that you're working on? And when I say everything that you're working on, I mean everything. So this involves the approach that I teach involves a little bit more thinking up front. So it involves a little bit more, you know, sort of proactively going into the thinking rather than necessarily being, you know, just kind of lazy and leaving the thinking till the last minute. But what you find when you do that is you end up with just so much more momentum, so much less stress, and just a much more in control way of working. But then what happens when we do start procrastinating? So we talk quite a lot on 6 Weeks to Ninja about the idea of the lizard brain. The lizard brain is where your procrastination comes from. And the lizard brain is the part of the brain, it's called the amygdala. It's the back of the brain. If you imagine like in your biology classes, it's that little round bit at the back. It's not the bit that looks like a brain, it's a prefrontal cortex kind of bit. But it's the evolutionary part of the brain. So it shouts the loudest. But the lizard brain is really concerned with not being judged, blending in, not standing out, not doing anything scary, not doing anything that involves conflict, because that's what lizards need to survive, right? So it's that part of the brain, that fight or flight, very instinctual part of the brain, very animalistic part of the brain. And this part of the brain really governs us more than we would like to think, more than we like to realize. And so when it comes to procrastination, often the reason that we're procrastinating is we're holding on to the piece of work because we don't want to press send. We don't want it to go out into the world, make its way in the world and get judged. We don't want anything that we do to get judged. Or we're holding on to this thing. We're not arranging the meeting with that person that we need to arrange the meeting with because we're worried there might be some conflict in there, or it might be, just a really uncomfortable place to be. And, the lizard brain really wants comfort and just wants everything to be in its most comfortable survival state. So we've got to really think about how do we manage this part of the brain? How do we interact with this part of the brain? Mindfulness is a really great technique to just understand the lizard brain a little bit more. When you create that little bit of space in the brain, you start to notice, oh, I'm just feeling a bit scared about that thing. I'm feeling a bit tense about that meeting tomorrow, or a little bit worried about having to deliver on this particular project. So giving yourself that little bit of mental headspace really frees you up to notice what the lizard brain is saying to you. Often it's kind of chattering away, but we're so busy that we don't really listen to it enough. But sometimes when we can get that little moment to just engage with it and understand it, we can start to make much better decisions. And I talk about in the book and also on 6 Weeks to Ninja, just this little diagnostic tool called Dust, which is a really nice way to think about procrastination. So given that February is the new January, if there's stuff that you feel a little bit stuck on, if there are perhaps New Year's resolutions that don't feel like they're going as planned so far this year, then really think about this little tool as a way to just diagnose why you might be stuck, why things might not be happening, why you might be procrastinating, and then use that to really get much more ruthless. So what Dust says is that there are basically four main reasons that you'd be procrastinating over something, and you really need to ask the lizard brain to figure this out. So the first one is difficult. Is the thing that I'm trying to do just a bit hard and difficult, and that's why I've not made any progress? Second one is it undefined? Do I not yet know what is that desired outcome? What is that next physical action? Do I need to just spend a bit more time just getting clearer on it before I can really make a start? Is it that what I'm working on is just really scary? I don't want to have that conversation with that person. I'm worried about the outcome of this, and so I'm just don't want to get started on it. Or is it something that just feels a bit too tedious, right? It's just this boring thing. And how we define that procrastination, how we diagnose it, and which one of those it mostly is, the D-U-S-T. Is it mostly difficult? Is it mostly undefined, scary, or tedious? And for most things that we procrastinate on, there's a clear winner. There's a clear lead of these four. So you work out what that is. And then there are different tactics that you can take to really start to make some progress on it. So for example, if something's really difficult, my suggestion is you take it off your to-do list and you replace it with something that is an action that focuses on bridging that skills gap. So you replace doing the thing with an action which says something like, I'm going to get some training on the thing, I'll get some advice from the thing, or I'm going to ask the person who did that thing last year, or whatever. So you reframe it in a way that bridges that skills gap, and then it becomes less difficult. Undefined, we've talked about the next physical action, desired project outcome. Once you have those, it's much easier to have momentum and much harder to procrastinate. When something is scary, have a think about when you had like maybe a project at school, an essay at university, those kind of things, and it had a deadline. You probably, if you're like most people, didn't make much progress on it for the entire month. And then like the day before it's due in, suddenly you start panicking and you're typing away and everything starts to happen. And what's happened in that moment is that you've basically replaced the fear of getting a bad mark for that piece of coursework with suddenly a bigger fear. And the bigger fear is, I don't want to miss the deadline. A, I'm going to look foolish. B, I might be losing some marks if I miss the deadline. So you replace the fear with a bigger fear, and that gets things moving. At work, we can use that same technique. So if you think about there's something that you're working on, you think it might be contentious or it might be difficult, a really great way to get things moving is basically to put a deadline in someone else's world. So you would do something like, okay, I'm going to set up a meeting with my boss for a week on Monday. And in the meeting request, I'm going to say, this is the meeting to talk through the report. Suddenly you've got a very important reason why you need to write that report, which is you don't want to sit in the room and have nothing in a week's time. So creating a slightly bigger fear and creating a deadline in someone else's world is a really nice way to think about that one. And something, if it's too tedious, put a podcast on, make it a game, like figure out a way to add some enrichment to that. We talk a lot at Think Productive about the idea of getting your inbox to zero, keeping your inbox at zero. Why does inbox zero work? Because it's a game. It's like, oh, I'm getting to zero, yes. And it turns probably one of the most banal and boring parts of our work, doing email, into something that is enriching and becomes a game. And then the final couple of things I want to talk about before we just open it up for questions is I talk a lot on the program around just the idea of self-care. I think one thing that happens a lot with the word productivity is people think of productivity as almost like a toxic word. And it feels like the world is just, trying to crack the whip and make me do more, and I've got to go faster on the hamster wheel and all this kind of stuff. And to me, that's just not what productivity should mean, and it's not what it should be. And so I really reject this whole idea of kind of toxic hustle culture, getting up at 5 a.m. and working till midnight and all the rest of it. All the science shows us that there is a law of diminishing returns in terms of how we work. Henry Ford set up the industrial age workplace to be 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, because he worked out that the law of diminishing returns was you kind of do 35, 40 hours of work on a factory assembly line, and then you're too tired. So give everybody 2 days off on Saturday and Sunday, and then they can come back in and be refreshed on Monday morning. So that's how it worked in the industrial age. The research that has been done in the information age, where your tool is not your hands, but your brain, is that we get tired by about 30 hours rather than 40 hours. So when we think about it in that way, we do not want to be burning the midnight oil, crunching and just working far too many hours and sort of thinking that that's going to be the best way to be productive. So we've really got to focus on deep fuel, and it's a really difficult thing. One thing that I talk about in the new book, In Kind, is that kindness starts with you. It's really difficult to be kind to everybody around you if you're driving yourself into the ground, you're being really unkind to yourself. So kindness starts with you. And when you're kind to yourself, you are role modeling kindness for everybody around you too. So everybody that you work with, when they see you taking that time for self-care, when they see you being kind to yourself, when they see you then being kinder to other people, you are role modeling that. And that's so generous because it allows them to be kind to themselves and kind to other people too. So never think about self-care as being selfish. Never think about self-care as being a luxury. Actually, you taking time for yourself, you taking some self-care is just hugely generous because it role models it for everybody else and allows everybody else to step into that same mindset. And a lot of this being kinder to ourselves, it's really about lowering our expectations. Of course, we want to care really deeply about the work that we're doing. We want to do work that matters. We want to do work that makes a difference. But we've also got to take care as well. And so we've got to lower those expectations. We've got to really be much more ruthless, coming back to the ninja ruthlessness, about what we're going to say yes to. We want to say no to an awful lot more things, get much more used to the idea of saying no, have less on our plate. And then the stuff that we do have left, we're going to do a much better job in really kind of meeting those challenges head on. And it's a lovely story. There was a piece of research a few years ago that looked at the idea of happiness and work-life balance and different countries around the world. And what often happens with these surveys and these kind of sort of international comparisons around things like work-life balance and productivity is, the Scandinavian countries, they always come top, right? And so there's this guy from Denmark, and they interviewed him on the news, on BBC News. And they said, right, so Denmark has come top for work-life balance and top for happiness. What is the secret of the Danish people? Like, what are you doing that we're not doing? And this guy from Denmark said, well, it's really simple. We just have lower expectations. So whilst that seems like just a very funny thing to say, I think there's something very profound in that as an approach to productivity. It's not about getting loads more stuff done. Ultimately, productivity is about making space for what matters. So when we think about our work-life balance, in many ways, work-life balance is a bit of a myth, right? We have one brain, so we take our work worries home, we take our worries to work, we have one brain. So making space for what matters really is, for me, the most important mindset to have when it comes to productivity. It's all about managing our minds. So it's about being calmer, not busier. And it's about doing less and not more. And it's working in a way that's really sustainable and energizing rather than in a way that tires us out. So that's really, just in a nutshell, the kind of mindset and approach that I have to productivity. It will not tell you how to work 5 in the morning till midnight. It will not tell you how to grind yourself and work yourself into the ground. But hopefully it will tell you how to make space for what matters. All right, so we're going to open this up for questions. I just want to talk about a couple of other bits just to do with the program, and then I'd love to just hear your questions, and you can type those into the Q&A or into the chat. So just in talking about the program, so 6 Weeks in Ninja, we start, if you're interested in joining us, we start on the 26th of February. As I said, it's a lunchtime program on Zoom, so it's designed to be over your lunch hour. Just take a slightly longer lunch hour, and that is your commitment over the 6 weeks. So 12 till 2 every Wednesday for 6 weeks. That's what we're going to cover over the 6 weeks. The ticket cost, so the ticket cost is £600, so it basically works out £100 a week. Also, if you're dialing in and you work in public sector or charity, then we do a charity public sector ticket, which is £350 for the entire 6 weeks. I'm also at the moment doing what I'm calling the 6-pack, which is basically 6 places on the program for the price of 5. So the price for that, for 6 places for the price of 5, is basically £3,000 if you've got 5 other colleagues that you want to have come join the program with you. £1,750 if you're in charity public sector. And we can invoice that directly with you to save you all the Eventbrite fees on top of that as well. So if you want to do that, if you're interested, the 6-pack is just like six places for the price of 5. And then just a couple of other things that Think Productive have got coming up. So there's another taster session happening next week, which is all about project management essentials and basically how to engage your stakeholders. So there's a little QR code on the screen if you want to sign up to that. And Dee from Think Productive, my colleague, is on this webinar, so she can jump in and answer your questions if you've got any questions on that. And if, by the way, you just can't make those dates that I just put up on the screen there, the Wednesday lunchtimes, we are doing basically the same content, or a way of getting the same training, but over a couple of half days on the 4th and 5th of March. So if that is more your bag, if that kind of works for you, morning UK times, then have a look there. And it's worth saying actually that like often people think about Think Productive as being a company that does personal productivity and Productivity Ninja. We have a whole bunch of other stuff going on. Don't know if Dee, you want to just share a link to our main webpage that lists all the workshops in the chat. But basically, we have everything from me doing my keynote on kindness. We have stuff on mental health awareness and mental health first aid. We have a whole session on our 4-day working week, which really talks about work-life balance, and stuff on hybrid working. We have leadership and management programs. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we can help with if you wanted to bring Think Productive in to help your team. We are far beyond just personal productivity. It's really about helping people to reimagine work. So if that's of interest, just head to thinkproductive.co.uk. And we've got a few minutes for some questions. So has anyone got any questions that you want to chuck in the chat? Let's have a look, and I'll also see if there's any Q&A here. There's one in the Q&A. Okay, so Andrew is asking, I'm curious as to why once I'm in a task, it's easy, I've got energy, giving attention and in the zone. But next day, when I come back to the same thing, I'm not able to get off go and get back to the flow I had the day before. Sometimes I can't even face it. Why? And how to manage it? Yeah, really good question, Andrew. So there's a couple of things there. The first is the first part of your question there, what you're describing is you're in that task and you've got energy and you're giving it attention and you're in the zone. So really, really important thing to fuel everything is that positive momentum. So that first day, you're in the zone, you've got momentum, you're giving it your attention, all good. Then when you come back to it, you can't face it, maybe you don't have the same flow. So what I would suggest there is what you've probably made progress on means that your next physical action that you've written down to say, let's start here, is probably no longer where you're going to have your starting point. So often it's just about going back and being slightly more specific and even just changing that in your to-do list manager and just saying, right, so now I'm halfway through, it's just pulling it all together rather than starting from scratch or whatever. So we go through everything that we go through, there are different phases to the project, and just keeping that second brain up to date will really play a really great role in terms of making sure that you have that momentum the next day. The other thing we do talk about on the program actually as well is just the idea of different levels of attention that we have. So at certain times of the day, we have what's called proactive attention, which is where you're really switched on. You've got all the you've got like all the sort of best energy to do your best work. There are other times in the day where you're tired. It's probably best not to try and tackle something difficult or whatever. So just organizing your lists, having your second brain set up to really help you to manage when you have good attention and less good attention, that will really help as well. So yeah, lots of stuff to help with that. Hi, I might have misunderstood. Oh, and then it follows up with misunderstood. I think, shall I just ignore your question there, Catherine? It looks like you've answered it yourself. Thank you. Andrew say, what role do you see AI playing in this field in the near future? A help or a hindrance? So I actually have my own AI tool. So if you've got any productivity questions after this, you can go to askgraham.ai, askgraham.ai, and that's a free tool, and you can just ask away. We have fed askgraham.ai all of my books, and it's got a whole coaching technology built into it as well. So it's really designed to be your virtual productivity coach. In terms of how I see AI interacting with stuff like second brains and lists, I don't think we're there yet in terms of, I don't think the AI tools are sophisticated enough to really have control of what are our biggest priorities. And I don't think we want to spend all of our time doing, really extensive labeling to work out what big priorities are. So I think at some point, you'll be able to just say to your AI, let's start work on my biggest priority, let's go. And it will start drafting the first email. And I don't think that's that far away, but I don't think we're there yet. So I do think there'll be some very beneficial uses of AI. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of a way to go. It's obviously really beneficial for when you're in tasks, and I'm using ChatGPT, all the time, but not for the thing of actually having control of our thinking. I think it always comes back to at the end of the day, like you've got to have confidence in the decisions that you're making, and you want to have control that and a sort of feeling of control that you've made the right decisions, that you're working on the right stuff, that nothing really important is slipping through the net and all of that. And I just think for me, certainly for me personally, I don't think AI is there yet. to be able to trust it as a second brain in that kind of way. But I think I'll get there eventually. But yeah, that's what I would think about that. Beat saying, happy to see you have a full week of overload, triple overload. We both know why that's important. Thank you. Full week of overload. I'm not sure. I have lots going on this week. There you go. Trying to see if there's any other questions in here. Do you have any advice for managing files once you've saved things as reference material? Yeah, I mean, lots of advice in the program around how to do that for email in particular. We look at the whole thing of, preparedness and how to have your file structure set up. And I think the principle for me is to have a system where you spend as little time organizing it as possible, but that stuff is as quick to find when you need it. So the counterintuitive thing for email is, everyone thinks, how do I make sure I don't lose an email? Well, let me make a whole email folder that's basically called the title of this email, and then I'll know to look there when the time comes. And what happens when you do that is you end up with 3,000 email folders and subfolders and subfolders, and then it just gets really complicated and messy. You're far better off having one folder that just says work, and then you go into that and use the search function to find the email you need. Generally, that is a better way to deal with files and folder structures than lots of subfolders, lots of subfolders, a big maze of 10 possible places it could be. And that's quite counterintuitive, but we talk about that with email within the program. And yeah, there's lots of kind of similar little nuggets like that are maybe a little bit counterintuitive sometimes, but will actually just help you to feel clearer in what you're doing. All right, I've got to button this up. I've got 2 minutes to go, and actually, I'm jumping onto my other program, Kind for Leadership, at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to button this up. All right. So very briefly then. So 6 weeks in Ninja. I'd love to see you on the 26th of Feb. The time commitment is 2 hours each week over 6 weeks. Lovely WhatsApp group community to hold you accountable as we move through the program as well. And just a reminder on the cost of places. One place, the cost is £600 for a place. If you're at charity public sector rate, it's $350. And then if you want to just message me separately, if you wanted to do some bulk places, we're doing a 6-pack, which is 6 places for the price of 5, which works out at $3,000 for the full price and $1,750 for public sector charity rate. So if that's of interest, drop me a line. Someone's saying, I loved your book. Thank you. Alison saying, I read your book as well. Thank you all. Yeah, if you want to drop me a line separately, then you can do. It's just graham@thinkproductive.co.uk. You can also message Dee, who is on the call, D brackets Think Productive. Look for in the attendees thing. Other than that, have a really great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, checking out, kicking the tires on 6 Weeks to Ninja. I hope you got some valuable little bits and pieces from that just to take into the rest of your day. So whether you join us or not, I would love to see you on the 26th of February. See you soon. Thanks, everybody.